up YouTube? This is Dan the Fix-It Man. Got another quick video here for you. I'm going to show you how to change your front brake pads and your front brake rotor on a 2004 Toyota Tundra. This will be the same for 2000 to 2006 models. Now the first thing I like to do is pry the caliper pistons back inside the caliper itself with a couple screwdrivers. In this case there are 4 pistons, 2 on each side, and that's a little tricky because you'll start to pry it one direction and the other 2 will come out, but you'll probably need to use 2 screwdrivers. Now I will be prying probably against the rotor as well. If you're not replacing the rotor, you might want to just try to pry from inside here, and you can actually shift the entire caliper each direction. Now there's other tools to do this. We can pull the pads out, and there's a couple little tools that have little clamps where you can actually, it's like a spreader, you can put them in there and pry it apart, or you can pull the caliper off in order to do that and just pry between the pads. That would work as well, but I'll probably just end up using the screwdriver method on this. But before we do, I just wanted to pop the hood and take a look at the master cylinder fluid level and make sure we're not going to make a mess up there. Now here's our master cylinder reservoir. What we can do is just pull the cap off, or if it's pretty clear like this one is, you can see that we've got plenty of room in here to raise this level of brake fluid without the chance of it spilling. If it was really near the top, you can use a rolled up paper towel to pull some of that fluid out. You can also just use a turkey baster to extract some of that old fluid. Just make sure it's not a turkey baster you plan on reusing for food, or just pick up a cheap one at the dollar store. But this one again looks okay. So I'm just going to leave the cap off while I do this. Sometimes I push the caliper pistons back in without taking the cap off. This is vented, which will allow the air to escape, but in this case I've already got it off. I'll just leave it off and push the caliper pistons back in, and then we'll make sure that we double check the level after stepping on the brake pedal once or twice when we're done. Alright, now with a couple screwdrivers we can kind of get inside here and just want to pry that open, create a little bit of space so that you can fit a screwdriver in between the pad and the rotor. And here we're just trying to push these caliper pistons back inside. You can see over here. Again, I'm replacing this rotor, so I don't really care about the surface of the rotor. I'm not being real careful here. Now remember, when you push one side, the other one wants to come out, so you might need to kind of alternate back and forth, pushing on either side until we get them all the way pushed back in. A small pry bar will help as well. Might give you a little more leverage. Now again, there's other ways to do this. There's other tools. A little, there's a little ratcheting spreader that you can pull the caliper off, and it will fit in between the pads, and it'll push the caliper pistons back in. There's another little trigger one. There's lots of tools out there, but if you're careful and take your time, you can get it done with some simple hand tools you might have around. Okay, now you see. Got lots more room in there for the new pad material and the new rotors as well. We can pull these little clips up here in the end of these slide pins. It's like a retaining type of slide pin, but see this little, it's like a little clip. Just pull it out. That's what it looks like. Let's set those aside. Same thing with the one on the bottom, kind of just spinning that around so we can pull it straight out. Same thing, don't lose those. Some kits come with new clips and some don't, but here we'll just tap these pins out. Set those aside as well. And then just pay attention to the orientation of this spring here. Goes like that. Of course, these little parts right here hook into the little holes on the brake pad backing plate, and we can pull out the old brake pads. This side was just starting to make noise. If you can see this little metal tab here, the squealer as a lot of times we call it, was just, you can see how it's shiny, it was just starting to scratch on the rotor, make contact there, and let us know that these were pretty much worn out. The reason I'm changing the rotors is I did have them turned once before, and they're starting to vibrate and shudder a little bit. I imagine that they're warped and beyond turning, so I just went ahead and picked up new rotors with the pads. There's a nice kit on Amazon that I picked up that I'll put a link in the description. And I like to just also pay attention to the orientation. This was the outside pad and the squealer was down. We'll just remember that when we put it back together. Now if you were just replacing pads and the rotor was in good shape, you could just put the pads in and put everything back together. But in this case, since we are taking off the rotor, I'm going to show you how we can remove the caliper. So I'm just going to loosen and remove these two bolts right here, and those are a 17 millimeter. That's what that bolt looks like. There's the other one. Now because of this metal line, I don't want to just yank the caliper up and set it aside. I'm going to disconnect this little clip here. Let me see if I can show you. This right here, you know, you could do a couple things. You could pull out this 12 millimeter bolt and disconnect the wheel sensor wiring here, or you can just yank on that and pull it out. I think I'm going to try that on this one. And if it doesn't work, I'll take out the 12 millimeter bolt. Pull it out with some pliers. There we go. You can see that's what that guy looks like right there. Again, it just pulls out of this little spot right here, and what that will let me do now, without bending this metal brake line, see, I can just pull the caliper off and kind of just position it up off of the rotor, and I'm just going to try to hang it up here. I just made this little, it's just a little piece of rope with some old bungee cord ends. So you can use zip ties or pretty much anything, but now that's hanging up out of the way. Patented brake caliper holder. Of course there's lots of other hooks and whatnot they sell, but see, now this is just kind of sitting here without any stress on that brake line, and now we can focus on getting that rotor off of there. Now sometimes on a four-wheel drive, a lot of these you got to take apart the hub and separate everything. On the Tundra you don't. It just sits right on here, and sometimes you can just pull them off, but if they've been on there for a while, in this case we can use the rotor remover 9000. You just give it a couple taps and take off the old one. Now that one wasn't stuck too bad, but before I put on the new one, I'm just going to try to brush this hub a little bit, get off any of that little surface rust. And now we can put on the new rotor. Just got one of these fancy drilled slotted ones. Again, this was a kit on Amazon. Pretty good deal actually, and I've used this brand. It's the Max Advanced Brakes. I've used this on a couple other vehicles and been happy with it. So just thought I would put this on my truck as well. I'll give you an update down the road if I have any issues, but I imagine this will work out just fine. Alright, now before we drop the caliper back down, lately I've been putting a little bit of this Sil-Glyde grease on the caliper boots, and the piston boot there, that seems to keep it a little bit more pliable. You know, it may attract more dust and debris as well, but I think it's working out okay. So I'm going to go ahead and just grease these up. Just a little coat of grease, just kind of, this is again silicone based grease, so it's safe to use on rubber. Now here's where I'll also tell you that you can use a C-clamp on the outside of this to push these back in if you didn't do the screwdriver method, or if you don't want to pry on that rotor, you can even use like a channel locks or Vise Grips with that that clamp on the outside. Might save you some time, might take longer, I don't know. Either way, it'll get it done. All right, now we can unhook that. Put away the caliper holder 9000, and then just slowly, carefully put the caliper back down over the rotor, right about where it goes there. And we can go ahead and put these caliper bolts back in. Sometimes you need to lift up a little bit on the caliper to get that aligned or get those bolts started. And then we can get these caliper bolts snugged down. We're going to go ahead and torque these to 100 foot-pounds. And don't forget to put that little clip back in that holds this brake line in place. And set up that clip. And use some pliers to hammer it back into place. Just kidding. You want to use a socket. Something like that. Just make sure that that's fully seated and not gonna fall out while you're driving. That looks good. Now these ones come with the shims already on them, but I'm still gonna put some grease on the back and on these ends here, which that'll help the brake pad slide around on the inside here and move as it needs to move. So again, using this Sil-Glyde brake grease, just a couple dabs will do it. Just kind of smooth that around. And these shims come off. Some shims are bonded to the pad. A lot of times if they come off, I should have done this before greasing up the back, but sometimes if they come off, I'll just put a little bit of grease underneath as well. I know that's what the factory Toyota pads and shims recommend. So, but again, if anything, it'll help dampen any noises or vibrations. This shim does have some sort of rubberized coating on here, but just get a nice thin layer in at these ends here, and then this is the inboard pad. Just slide that in. About there. And remember, just to make sure you get the proper orientation with this little metal clip or noisemaker, so that in this case it's on the outside one and it was facing down. And make sure you don't get any grease on the surface of the pad or the surface of the rotor. That would not be good. Well, again, I did the same thing. Did the outside first without pulling that shim off. There we go. Again, when they come off like this, I'll just put a little bit of grease on the underside of the shim. Then we can put the shim on. It snaps back into place, and finish off putting some grease on the outside and on these little ends. I like to put some grease there because it allows the brake to move around on the inside here. And just slide that one back in. Now this kit does not come with new hardware, so you are going to be reusing these clips. And this is how it goes. This part faces down, and these clips go into the sides here. There's 2 holes in the brake pad, and then just push it into place. Before I put the slide pins back in, I'm just going to clean them up with a little bit of brake cleaner and this paper towel. Just clean all of the debris off of there, and then I'm going to hit those with some of that Sil-Glyde brake grease as well. If anything, that will keep things moving. Let the brake pads move in and out as they need to without binding up in there. And it'll make it easier to take them out next time. And I'm just going to do both at the same time here. Just kind of make sure that they're all greased up the way they need to be. I'm going to put the bottom one in first. Sometimes you got to wiggle that or pull it out a little bit to make sure that it lines up. And now for the top one, same thing. Just try to line that up. Make sure it doesn't hang up on that clip there as you're pushing it through. And same thing, just make sure that that goes through the right way and that this spring is still seated there properly. Now remember, we've got these little clips here that they just go into these holes at the ends of those pins. You can see there's a close-up of what that looks like. So this straight part right here, just push that straight through. Same thing with the bottom. If those holes don't line up, grab it and turn it a little bit. There we go. And then just kind of do the same thing. Snap it into place. And you're done. Just remember to step on the brake pedal once or twice before you drive off, because that will push the brake pads back up against the rotor where they need to be. And don't forget to top off the master cylinder, verify the proper level, and of course put the cap back on. I'll put a link in the description to those brake pads and the rotor. It was actually a combo kit I got on Amazon. I hope you liked the video. Please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you don't mind. That does help me out. Don't forget to check out some of my other videos on Tundras as well. I've actually done a few videos on this particular truck. Thanks so much for watching, and good luck.